Your dead wife can't wear it anymore. My son shrugged, tossing the empty velvet box on my kitchen table. My throat went dry. That little box had sat untouched on my dresser since the day we buried Marjorie. I opened it with trembling hands, hoping somehow this was a mistake. But it was gone. Her ring, the one I saved for 2 years to buy. I needed money for Melissa's birthday, he said, like it was nothing. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I remember the first time I held him. He was wrapped in a blue hospital blanket, eyes barely open, squinting up at the world like he didn't trust it yet. I whispered, "Don't worry, little man. I got you." And for the next 35 years, I tried to keep that promise. Back then, everything felt simple. Hard, yes, but simple. I worked construction most of my life. Sun up to sundown. Calloused hands, sore back, paycheck to paycheck. But I came home to a house filled with warmth. Marjorie would have dinner ready, meatloaf or chicken casserole, and our boy would come running barefoot down the hallway to meet me at the door. He always wanted to carry my lunchbox, even when it was too heavy for him. We named him after my father, a good man who worked with his hands and believed in looking people in the eye when you talked to them. I thought we were raising him the same way, grounded, respectful, humble, and for a while, I really believed we were. Marjorie ran a little flower shop from home. Nothing fancy, but enough to keep her busy and pay for extras, piano lessons, birthday parties, Sunday shoes. She had a green thumb and a heart even bigger. If a neighbor lost a loved one or was going through hard times, she'd send them a bouquet with a handwritten card. No charge. People need beauty in the worst moments, she used to say. God, I miss her. Our house was never big, but it was full of laughter, full of music, full of messes and birthday candles and Christmas stockings. Every Sunday night, we had dinner as a family. No phones, no distractions. Roast beef, mashed potatoes, corn on the cob in the summer. We'd go around the table and share something good from our week. My boy loved those dinners. He used to lean on my shoulder and say, "I want a family like this when I grow up." Even after he went off to college, local, state school, 2 hours away, he'd come home on weekends with laundry and a big appetite. He'd help me fix the leaky roof, or sit beside Marjorie while she baked, stealing bits of dough when he thought she wasn't looking. She always caught him, and always let him. After graduation, he struggled to find a job in his field. Too many applicants, not enough experience, he'd say. So he picked up a few odd jobs here and there, moved in with roommates, then came back home when the pandemic hit. Just until things settle, he told me. I didn't mind. The house was quieter since Marjorie passed, and having him around again felt like a second chance, a new chapter. But something had changed. The boy who used to help me fix fences and bring his mother flowers on her birthday, he wasn't there anymore. Not exactly. He still smiled, still called me Dad, still said thank you when I made breakfast. But there was a distance, a numbness in his eyes. He stayed in his room longer, stopped helping around the house, stopped asking how I was doing. I figured it was grief. We were all grieving. Marjorie had passed just 6 months before he moved back in breast cancer. She fought so hard. I held her hand through every chemo session, every scan, every sleepless night. I watched the strongest woman I ever knew fade right in front of me. And the day she passed, he wasn't there. Said he couldn't handle seeing her like that. I never held that against him. Or at least, I tried not to. Maybe I thought if I gave him space, he'd come around. That the boy I raised would find his way back. So I didn't say much when he brought home takeout and left the dishes. I didn't say anything when he started staying out all night. I told myself, he's hurting, just like you. Give him time. But time kept moving, and he kept drifting further. He started dating a girl named Melissa, loud, flashy, always on her phone. She once rolled her eyes when I asked her to take her heels off at the door. "It's just an old rug," she said. That rug was Marjorie's favorite. She picked it out after her second round of chemo because she said the colors made her feel hopeful. Still, I stayed quiet. Tried to stay hopeful myself. I figured every family had its rough patches. Maybe we just needed another Sunday dinner. Another story. Another laugh. Another moment to bring us back together. But those moments stopped coming. And little by little, things started to disappear. Not just objects, but kindness, respect, warmth. I'd find empty liquor bottles in the garage. My tools moved without explanation. A set of Marjorie's antique plates vanished from the cabinet. When I asked about them, he said, "Maybe you broke them and forgot." That stung. I'm old, yes, but I'm not senile. I remember what's mine, and I know what we built. I remember the way Marjorie used to look at him when he came home from school, all scraped knees and crooked smiles. "That boy's got your heart," she'd say. If only that were still true. I wish I could say the change happened overnight, that one day he was my son, and the next, a stranger. But that would be easier than the truth. The truth is, it happened so slowly, so quietly. I didn't even realize what I was losing until it was already gone. It started with little things. The first time I really noticed something was off, he interrupted me during a story. I was talking about the summer we fixed the old shed, how he was just 12, but insisted on hammering every nail himself. I laughed, remembering how crooked those boards were. He didn't smile, just looked up from his phone and muttered, Yeah, I remember, Dad. You've told me like 5 times. My words caught in my throat. I laughed it off, said, well, it was a good memory, but inside, something felt different. That memory used to mean something to both of us. A week later, I made his favorite meatloaf, just like his mom used to. He didn't come to the table. When I knocked on his door, he said he already ate out with Melissa. No apology, no thanks. I ended up putting his plate in the fridge and eating alone. I tried to remind myself, he was grown now. He had his own life. Maybe I was clinging too tightly to the past. But even as I tried to stay calm, the signs kept piling up. He stopped calling me Dad as often. Sometimes I'd just get a flat yeah or uh-huh in response when I asked about his day. The house started feeling less like our home and more like his crash pad. He played loud music late into the night, left his laundry in the washer for days, took over the living room with Melissa's stuffed makeup bags, high heels, Amazon boxes piled by the door. I asked politely if she could maybe keep some of her things in his room. He rolled his eyes and said, "It's not a museum, Dad. Loosen up." A museum. That's what he thought of this house? The home his mother decorated with every curtain, every frame, every flower in the garden placed by her own hands? A museum? Still, I stayed quiet. I thought maybe he was going through something he didn't know how to talk about. Grief twists people. It makes them selfish. I kept telling myself that even when he asked if I could spot him $200 for a car repair, I gave it to him. Of course I did. But then it became $300 the next month. Then $500 for something urgent. I never saw receipts, never saw repairs. Just empty promises of, "I'll pay you back next week, promise." And still, I stayed quiet. I didn't want to fight. I thought I could love him through this. That if I kept giving, kept showing patience, he'd remember who he used to be. But slowly, the balance began to shift. This wasn't just my son living in my house. This was a man who had begun to think of himself as the owner. He started talking like it. "I don't get why you're holding on to all this junk," he said one afternoon, pointing to Marjorie's china cabinet. "No one wants this old stuff anymore. We could open up the space." "We?" I stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. That night, I stood in the kitchen, just looking around. The light over the sink, the magnets on the fridge, Marjorie's calendar still hanging by the pantry door, frozen on the month she passed. I remember whispering, "Are you still here, Marjorie? Because I don't know what I'm doing anymore." And I swear, the wind outside rattled the windows just a little, like she was answering. Or maybe I just wanted to believe that. One evening, I walked into the living room, and caught Melissa sitting on the couch with her feet on the coffee table, the table I built by hand in our garage 25 years ago. She was scrolling through her phone, loudly chewing gum. I tried to ignore it. Then she turned to me and said, "Hey, you got any whiskey? We're trying to have a chill night." "No, please. No, Mr. Anything." Just like I was the hired help. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I just nodded toward the cabinet and walked outside. I stood on the porch for almost an hour. My knees were aching, and the air was cold, but it felt better than being in there. That was the night I started sleeping with the door locked. I didn't tell him. I just started turning the lock quietly at night, after they were asleep. I know how that sounds, like a man afraid in his own house. But it wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was grief. Grief for the home I used to know. Grief for the son who used to sit cross-legged on the floor, asking me how to build things. Grief for the woman whose absence was turning every corner of this house into a shadow. And still, I stayed quiet. I thought maybe things would settle. That once he got back on his feet, maybe he'd move out, start fresh, find his footing again. But deep down, I think I already knew. This wasn't just grief anymore. This was disrespect. And it was only a matter of time before that disrespect turned into betrayal, one I never saw coming. I came home from the VFW hall earlier than usual that afternoon. The game had ended early, and I wasn't much in the mood for small talk. I just wanted to sit in my recliner with some quiet, maybe warm-up leftovers, and listen to the oldies station Marjorie used to love. The house was quiet. His car was in the driveway, but I didn't hear the television or music blaring like usual. I went upstairs, stepped into my room to change out of my good jacket, and that's when I saw it. The top drawer of my dresser, the one with the small velvet box, was open. My stomach dropped before I even looked inside. It was empty, gone. I stared at that little space for a full minute, hoping maybe, just maybe, it had fallen behind the drawer. I pulled it out, checked the floor, checked the corners, checked again. Nothing. That ring had sat in that box since the day I took it off Marjorie's finger before we closed the casket. I couldn't bury her with it. I just couldn't. It felt like too much of our story to let go. I kept it close, right there in the drawer beside my watch and my old army dog tags. And now it was gone. I stood there, frozen, breathing hard. Not angry yet, just confused, sick in the gut. I didn't want to believe what I was thinking. I didn't want to believe he would take it. I walked downstairs slowly, and there he was, sitting on the couch, feet up, phone in hand, grinning at something. "Hey," I said, voice low. "Did you take something from my dresser?" He looked up, blinked. "What?" "My drawer," I said. "The little velvet box. The ring." He paused, shrugged. "Oh, that old thing? That old thing." He didn't even flinch. "Yeah," he said. Setting his phone down like this was no big deal. "I pawned it. I needed some cash for Melissa's birthday." My ears started ringing. I felt heat behind my eyes, but I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just stood there. "You... what?" He rolled his eyes. "Come on, Dad. It's just sitting there collecting dust. She's gone. What's the point?" I stared at him like I was seeing him for the first time. "That ring," I whispered, "was your mother's wedding ring. I saved for 2 years to buy it. She wore it every day of our life together. I held her hand with that ring on when she took her last breath." He stood, annoyed now. "Don't be so dramatic. I'll get you another one if it means that much." "I don't want another one." "Well, it's done," he said. "The money's spent. I got Melissa a necklace way nicer, honestly." It made her cry. I sat down slowly. The air knocked right out of me. That ring had meant something. It was a symbol, a memory, a part of Marjorie the First had held on to all these years. And he sold it for a birthday gift, not even something vital, not rent, not food, a gift. I didn't speak to him for the rest of the night. He didn't apologize. He didn't even seem to understand why I was upset. Later, during dinner, I saw Melissa wearing a brand new gold necklace, thin, with a little diamond charm. She caught me looking and smiled. "Do you like it?" He surprised me. I said nothing. I couldn't. My brother had stopped by to return some tools that evening. He saw the tension, saw the way I barely touched my food. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly, while the kids scrolled their phones. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to scream it in front of everyone. He sold Mom's ring. He doesn't care. None of them care. But I just shook my head and said, "Long day." Because in that moment I realized something worse than the betrayal. No one else cared either. My brother didn't ask again. My son went right back to his phone. Melissa turned the television on and laughed at a sitcom like nothing happened. The silence. It was louder than the betrayal. That night, I walked into the garage, turned on the light, and just stood there staring at my old workbench. The place where I fixed Marjorie's broken chair legs, glued photo frames back together, and helped my son build his first birdhouse. I reached for a dusty box on the shelf and found our wedding photo. Her smile, her veil, the ring on her finger catching the sunlight. I held it close to my chest and sat down on the old stool, alone with the ache. That was the first time I felt something break inside me. Not anger, not even sadness. Something colder. Detachment. I realized. My son thought he had all the power now. That because I was old, because I was quiet, because I'd never raised my voice at him, I wouldn't fight back. Maybe that was his biggest mistake. Because 2 days later, I got a call from someone who changed everything. The pawn shop owner. And what he told me made my blood run cold. 2 mornings after that dinner, the phone rang just as I was finishing my coffee. I almost didn't answer, figured it was another robocall or someone asking for donations. "Hello?" I said, already half annoyed. Hi," a man replied, his voice uncertain. "Is this Mr. Harris?" "Yes," I said slowly. "Who's calling?" "This is Walter. I own Cornerstone Pawn on 8th and Maple. Listen, I don't usually make calls like this, but your name was engraved inside a ring that came into my shop earlier this week. A gold band with the initials MH, and the wedding date the 2nd of October, 1977. I felt the blood drain from my face. "That was my wife's," I said softly. "I figured," he replied. "It looked like someone sold it in a hurry. Young guy, said it was his mother's, but she had passed." My stomach turned. "I paid him cash," Walter continued. "But after looking at the engraving, I did some digging. Found your number on a directory from the Veterans Hall. I just thought you should know." I sat there gripping the edge of the table. Can I buy it back?" "Of course," he said. "You'll have to cover the ticket price, I'm sorry to say. But I've held it aside. Didn't put it on display." I thanked him. I must have thanked him 3 or 4 times before hanging up. I drove straight there. When Walter placed the ring in my hand, I almost couldn't breathe. I turned it over, saw Marjorie's initials and our wedding date. Her hands had worn this every day for 42 years. This little circle of gold had touched every part of our life together, from hospital rooms to holiday dinners to the quiet moments when we simply held hands in the dark. I paid $600 to buy it back, twice what he'd sold it for. I didn't even blink. When I got back home, I didn't go inside right away. I sat on the porch steps, holding that ring, staring at the garden Marjorie used to tend. The flowers were overgrown now. She would have hated that. I slipped the ring into my pocket and went inside. He was in the kitchen, eating cereal like nothing had happened. No apology, no mention of the ring. I didn't say anything either. Not yet. But something inside me shifted that day. I stopped trying to fix things. I started observing. The next day, I noticed him in the garage, rummaging through storage boxes. When I asked what he was looking for, he shrugged and said, "Just organizing stuff. Making room." His voice was casual. Too casual. I started locking my bedroom when I wasn't home. Then, I set up a second key hidden in the basement, just in case. That weekend, I walked past his room and overheard something that made my skin crawl. He was on the phone with someone I couldn't tell who, but I caught the words clearly. No, once the house is in my name, we're gutting the place. All the antiques are going. It's a gold mine. I've got plans. I stood there, frozen. The house is in my name? Plans? I backed away slowly and went into my room, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, clutching Marjorie's ring. He had plans, all right, and I was just the old man in the way. Later that night, I waited until the house was quiet and went into the attic. I dug out a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were old tax returns, the deed to the house, insurance policies, and my original will. My heart beat faster the deeper I read. The house was still mine, sole owner. The will still left everything to him back when I trusted him. I sat on the attic floor for hours, the cold seeping into my knees, thinking about the life I had built, the home Marjorie had loved, the son we had raised with every ounce of our goodness. How did we get here? It was no longer just about the ring. This wasn't grief. This wasn't confusion. This was strategy. A plan. A plan I wasn't meant to know about. A plan to erase me. And I couldn't let that happen. The next morning, I began watching him differently, listening closer, and I realized this wasn't just neglect. This was a scheme, one that I'd have to stop before it was too late. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. I waited until he was sitting on the couch with his feet up, scrolling through his phone like he didn't have a care in the world. The nerve of it relaxing in the home I built, surrounded by the furniture Marjorie picked, acting like the king of a castle that wasn't his. I took a deep breath and sat down across from him. We need to talk, I said. He didn't even look up. Can it wait? No, I said firmly. It can't. He gave an exaggerated sigh, lowered the phone, and leaned back. All right, shoot. I didn't raise my voice. I kept it calm, cold almost. I know you sold your mother's ring. I got it back. That caught his attention. His eyes darted up. What? The pawn shop owner called me. He saw her initials. Thought I should know. He scoffed. That guy's got no right. I cut him off. Don't. Just don't. For the first time in weeks, I looked him straight in the eyes. And I heard you on the phone, talking about remodeling, selling antiques, making plans for my house. He looked rattled just for a second, but then smirked. I was just talking. You're overreacting. No, I'm not, I said. You've made it clear what you think of this place. And of me. He laughed, and said, Okay, what are you going to kick me out now, old man? Call a lawyer? That was the moment I realized just how far gone he was. Why are you here? I asked quietly. Really? He shrugged. Because I don't want you to be alone. No, I said. You're here because you think you're entitled to what I've built. You think age makes me weak. You think silence means surrender. I stood up. You're wrong. He stared at me, a bit thrown. Then he stood too, squaring his shoulders like I was challenging him. I've taken care of you, he snapped. Paid bills, ran errands. With my money, I said sharply. Using my car in my house. His jaw clenched, but he had no answer. You don't take care of me. You're waiting me out. That's not care. That's calculation. He didn't respond, just stormed out the back door, slamming it hard enough to rattle the windows. That night, I sat on the porch, staring out at the street, until the stars came out. I remembered the first time we brought him home from the hospital, how small he was, wrapped in that little blue blanket, how he gripped my finger with all his strength. And now, this. I started making calls the next day. First, to my friend Glenn. He and I served together in Vietnam, and he'd worked in real estate law for years. Then to Mr. Thacker, our neighbor and family lawyer. I didn't tell them everything right away. I just asked for advice, quietly, carefully. Over the next week, I began documenting everything. Every comment, every phone call I overheard, every missing item, every lie. I also started locking up more than just my bedroom. I moved valuables into a safe in the garage, changed the passcode, hid the will, began cleaning out drawers and sorting papers like a man preparing for war. Neighbors began to notice I wasn't my usual self. Mrs. Elkins from across the street dropped off a peach cobbler one afternoon, said she'd seen him yelling in the driveway and just wanted to check on me. I thanked her. And for the first time, I didn't say, "We're fine." I said, "Things aren't what they used to be." She gave me a sad little nod. "They never are." She paused, then added, "But you don't have to pretend." That meant more than she knew. I wasn't pretending anymore. I was planning. One night, I stood in the hallway, listening through the crack of his door as he laughed on a video call. "She's 78, dude," he said. "Barely mobile. We're just helping her plan ahead." I leaned against the wall, closed my eyes, and made a decision right there and then. No more waiting. No more hoping he'd come around. No more letting him hold a place in this home he had stopped respecting. The next morning, I made the call to Mr. Thacker. It was time to rewrite the will, and what I put in that new will would change everything. For him, for me, and for everyone who thought I was too old to fight back. The hardest part wasn't changing the will. It was admitting, on paper, that my son no longer deserved anything I'd spent my whole life building. That morning, I sat in Mr. Thacker's office, the same place Marjorie and I visited over 20 years ago when we first drafted our joint will. Back then, everything had gone to our son. There was never a question. We trusted him. We believed that love and memories and the values we taught him would be enough. But now, I was here alone. The place hadn't changed much. Still smelled like old wood and lemon polish. Still had the same ticking wall clock that always ran 5 minutes slow. But I had changed. My back ached. My hands shook. And I no longer believed that love alone could protect what mattered. Thacker leaned forward, glasses perched low on his nose. "You sure about this?" I nodded. Every word. He gave a long sigh, pulled out the folder I'd brought with notes, accounts, the original deed to the house, and a list of instructions I'd handwritten over several sleepless nights. We worked through it line by line. The house? Donated to a veteran transitional housing organization, Marjorie's Place, I would call it, in her memory. My savings and pension? Split between 2 charities, one for cancer research and another for single mothers starting small businesses. Marjorie would have liked that. The will also included a specific clause. One I made sure was worded ironclad. If the will is contested by any family member for any reason, all assets, including the house, accounts, and items of value, will be legally forfeited and transferred to charitable organizations. No exceptions. No settlements. Thacker raised an eyebrow when we got to that part. "You really want to go that far?" he asked. "I need to," I said, "because I know he will. He won't go quietly." We kept the clause. There was only one part of the will where his name still appeared, one small envelope. "To my grandson, if he chooses to find me again." Inside, a letter, a photograph, and a key. Thacker looked at me carefully. "You still have hope for him?" "I have a memory of who he was as a boy," I said. "And sometimes, that's enough." After we signed the papers, had them notarized, and made official copies, I stood and stared out the office window. I didn't feel relief. Not exactly. I felt sorrow. Deep, bitter sorrow. But beneath that, a strange sense of control, like I had just reclaimed something no one had the right to take from me. Marjorie. Our home. Our story. I walked back to the car with a manila envelope under my arm and my hands cold despite the Sunday. When I got home, I didn't say anything to him. I just placed the envelope in the safe in the garage, updated the combination, and began clearing out the guest room. If this house was going to be more than a graveyard of memories, it had to change, and I had to be the one to change it. That night, I made dinner just for myself and ate in silence at the kitchen table. I placed Marjorie's ring next to my plate, like she was there with me. I did it, I whispered. I protected what we built. Upstairs, I heard him laughing through the walls, probably on the phone again, probably making more plans. He had no idea that I had already made mine. But fate has a funny way of timing things, because just as I started reclaiming my life, he crossed a line I never thought he'd dare cross. One final act that changed everything. The letter was folded neatly on the kitchen counter right next to the coffee pot, as if it were nothing more than a reminder to buy milk. I almost didn't see it at first, just a plain envelope with my name scrawled across the front in my son's handwriting. No greeting, no respect, just 3 words. Time to decide. Inside was a printed brochure for a local assisted living facility, Winding Pines Retirement Community, a place I'd never heard of. It had smiling nurses on the cover, a stock photo of a gray-haired man playing chess with a nurse, and the words, "Dignified aging in comfort." Tucked inside was a post-it note. Went ahead and booked you a tour for next Thursday. Place has good reviews. Melissa says they've got card games and a piano. No discussion. No question. Just a plan already in motion behind my back. I stood there, my coffee turning cold in my hand. The silence of the kitchen louder than a scream. I felt my fingers tighten around the brochure before I forced myself to set it down gently. He wasn't just waiting for me to go anymore. He was pushing. I walked outside into the backyard, where the garden used to bloom. The rose bushes Marjorie had planted were mostly overgrown now, a tangle of stems and forgotten petals. I stood there and stared at them, remembering the way she used to hum while pruning them. Always the same song, Moon River. That was the moment I knew. He didn't see me as a person anymore. I was an inconvenience, an old man in the way of his future. That night, I pulled out the fireproof box from the garage and placed the following inside. My updated will, the house deed, a notarized copy of the clause, a copy of the letter I planned to give him, just 1 page, folded in thirds, and Marjorie's ring. I added a note to the outside. Deliver only upon my death or by my hand. Then I packed a small suitcase. Not to leave, to prepare. I made photocopies of everything and gave them to Mr. Thacker for safekeeping. I called Glenn and told him to be on standby. I cleared off the guest bed and stripped the linen from the master bedroom, not for him, not for Melissa, for me, because I had one final act to prepare. He had pushed me to the edge, and now it was my turn to take the next step. The next morning, I watched as he loaded his car with Melissa's shopping bags. She slammed the trunk and laughed as he kissed her goodbye. "I'll be back late," he called over his shoulder. "We're going to a birthday brunch downtown." I nodded, calm as a still pond. "All right," I said. And then I went back inside and packed a different kind of bag, not clothes, not toiletries, documents, truth, justice. The kind of bag you bring when you're about to tell the world what really happened and burn the lies to the ground, because they didn't know it yet. But I planned to show up at that very brunch and make sure everyone saw the truth for what it was. I wasn't invited. Of course I wasn't. It was Melissa's birthday brunch, hosted at some upscale cafe downtown, the kind with $18, pancakes, and mimosa towers. The kind where people dressed like they were trying to prove something. I'd never stepped foot inside the place, but I knew my son would be there, and I knew what I needed to do. I wore my Sunday best, the suit Marjorie picked out for our 40th anniversary. Navy blue, with a crisp white shirt. I hadn't worn it since her funeral, but this time, I wasn't mourning. I was ready to speak. I arrived 10 minutes after the party started. I stood outside for a moment, watching them through the tall windows. My son was at the center of the table, laughing loudly, his arm draped behind Melissa's chair like he didn't have a care in the world. Balloons floated over her seat. A little banner behind them read, "Melissa's Milestone." I stepped inside. Heads turned, slowly at first. I saw his jaw tighten the second he noticed me. His smile froze mid-laugh, then dropped entirely. "Dad, what are you doing here?" he said sharply, half standing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I walked straight to the head of the table and placed a small gift box wrapped in plain brown paper in front of Melissa. "I brought a gift," I said. She blinked. Thanks?" "Go on, open it." The whole table was watching now. His friends, her friends, a few cousins, even Melissa's parents, who I'd never met before. She peeled the paper, opened the lid, and inside was Marjorie's wedding ring. Gasps. Not dramatic ones. Just a soft wave of shocked silence. "What is this?" she asked, confused. "It's the ring he sold," I said, looking directly at my son. "The one his mother wore for 42 years. He pawned it to buy you that necklace." The air was thick now. Chairs creaked. Forks stopped moving. I turned to face the rest of the table. "I got it back." The pawnshop owner recognized my name engraved inside it. Melissa looked down at her necklace like it was burning her skin. "Dad, this isn't the place," my son started. "You're right," I cut in. "This should have happened much sooner." I reached into my coat and pulled out a manila envelope. "This," I said, tapping the papers, "is a copy of my new will." He went pale. "I want you all to hear this," I continued, "because I want it to be public, clear, no confusion." I read from the front page. "All property and assets are to be donated to charitable causes, including this home, which will become a transitional shelter for veterans and single parents. If anyone contests this will for any reason, all assets will default immediately to a federal charity. There will be no payout, no settlement." My son stood up. "You're humiliating me." "No," I said, locking eyes with him. "You did that yourself. You're ruining my life over one stupid ring?" "No," I said again, my voice steady. "I'm taking back mine." A few guests stood awkwardly. Others just stared. Melissa looked like she wanted to disappear. "I raised you to be kind," I said, "to protect family, to honor what matters. Your mother and I gave you everything. And you decided that wasn't enough." He said nothing, just stood there, red-faced, breathing heavy. I tucked the ring back into my pocket, turned to the group, and said calmly, "I won't take any more of your time. Enjoy your brunch." And I walked out. I didn't look back. That silence, that moment of stunned truth, echoed louder than any argument could have. But when I got home, the real silence was just beginning. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. I sat on the porch for nearly an hour after I got home, the weight of what I'd done still settling in my chest. The sun was warm, the air quiet, but everything felt different. Like I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. But it wasn't regret I felt. It was relief. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying silence like a burden. I'd spoken. I'd acted. And no matter what happened next, I knew I had honored Marjorie and myself. That night, the phone didn't ring. The next morning, still nothing. No knocks on the door. No texts. No apology. Just silence. The kind of silence that confirms what you already knew in your gut. That some people never intended to make things right, only to take what they could for as long as you let them. By the third day, the neighbors had started talking. Mrs. Elkins from across the street came by with a warm peach pie and a raised eyebrow. Heard there was a bit of drama downtown. I gave her a quiet smile. You could say that. She didn't press, just patted my arm and said, "It's about time, if you ask me." I went for a walk that afternoon down the path Marjorie and I used to take every spring, through the sycamores behind the house. The trees had already started shedding, gold and brown leaves crunching under my shoes. It was peaceful, not lonely peaceful. I paused by the old bench overlooking the creek, the one we carved our initials into back in '78. The M plus J was faded now, barely visible, but I traced it anyway with my thumb, like I always did. "I miss you, sweetheart," I whispered. And I swear, the wind rustled the leaves just enough to feel like a reply. That night, I pulled out Marjorie's old photo albums. Not the digital stuff, the real ones. With Polaroids and faded prints and little notes in her handwriting like Easter '89 and first day of kindergarten. Page after page, our life played out before me, a story of love, effort, patience, and pride. And I realized something. I wasn't mourning the loss of my son. I was mourning the loss of who he used to be. And maybe, just maybe, who I used to be, too. I heard the front gate creak around dusk. A car door slammed. Then, soft footsteps on the walkway. I stayed seated in my armchair, waiting. A knock. 3. Hesitant, almost shy. When I opened the door, it wasn't him. It was my grandson. He looked older, taller than I remembered, with a scruffy beard and tired eyes. He was holding a duffel bag and a Tupperware container. "Hey, Grandpa." I swallowed hard. "You didn't have to come. I wanted to," he said. "I heard what happened. I didn't know. About the ring. About any of it." I stepped aside. "Come in." We sat at the kitchen table, the same one his father and I used to share breakfast at when he was a boy. He opened the container. Lasagna. Still warm. "Mom made it," he said. "Said you probably haven't had a real meal all week." I smiled a little. "You tell her I'm still better at lasagna." He laughed, and for a moment, the years melted away. We ate in silence for a while, just the clinking of forks and the quiet hum of the fridge filling the space. Then he spoke. "I don't know what happened between you and Dad, but I know this house was always filled with love, and I hate that it turned into something else." I nodded. It didn't have to, but he made his choices. He looked down. "Do you think he'll ever come back?" "I think he'll have to face himself before he faces me," I said. "And that may take longer than either of us can wait." He nodded, slowly. Before he left, he pulled something from his bag, a framed photo. It was of Marjorie, holding him as a toddler, both of them laughing. "Thought you'd want this back," he said. "Dad kept it in the garage. I found it last week." I held the frame for a long moment. "Thank you," I whispered. As he walked down the steps, he turned and said, "If you ever need help with anything yard work, groceries, anything, I'm just a call away." I nodded. "I might take you up on that." The porch light flickered on behind me as he drove off. I stood there until his taillights disappeared around the corner. The silence returned, but this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt clean. That small visit, that quiet lasagna dinner, it planted something in me. Not just closure, but a seed, a new idea, a new purpose. And I knew exactly where to begin. The next morning, I woke up before the Sunday. The house was still the kind of stillness that used to make me ache, but now felt like space, like clarity. I brewed a pot of coffee and sat on the porch with Marjorie's photo in my lap. Her smile still had the same effect on me, steadying, reminding me of who we were and who I still could be. That's when the idea hit me. Not all at once. It started small. I looked out at the yard, the one she used to spend hours tending, the one I let fall to weeds these last couple years. I thought about all the rooms in this house that sat empty. Guest rooms, the attic, even the sunroom no one used since Marjorie got sick. I thought about the will, the shelter. But why wait for it to happen after I'm gone? Why not start now? I called Glenn, the old army buddy I'd reached out to before. He'd been working with a group that helped place struggling veterans into temporary homes. Some were fresh out of the service. Others were older guys, like us men, who gave everything to this country and came home to nothing. He answered on the first ring. "I was hoping you'd call," he said. We talked for over an hour. He told me about a young Marine who'd lost his leg to an IED, now couch surfing with strangers. A Gulf War vet who was sleeping in his car behind a tire shop. A woman from the Air Force discharged after 12 years trying to raise 2 kids in a motel. People think homeless vet and picture a drunk guy on a street corner, Glenn said. But it's wider than that. Lonelier. Quieter. That stuck with me. I've got the space, I said. I've got more house than I know what to do with. There was a long pause. You sure, brother? I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Marjorie would have wanted it. And I think I need it too. We got to work that same week. I started in the attic, hauling down old boxes, sorting what mattered from what could go. Framed every letter Marjorie had ever written me, kept them in a binder. Donated clothes, gave away furniture, kept only what carried weight. The guest rooms were first. I repainted them myself. Slow work with shaky hands, but I did it. Bought clean linens, fixed the wobbly doorknobs. Glenn stopped by with a list of possible residents. No more than 3 at a time, I told him. I want to know their names, their stories. This isn't a boarding house. He smiled. I'll make sure of it. Word got out faster than I expected. Mrs. Elkins came by with homemade quilts. The church sent over a box of canned goods. Even the local hardware store offered to donate tools and supplies. It felt like the whole town had been waiting for someone to make a move. And when I did, they followed. One day, while scrubbing the baseboards in the back room, I found an old shoebox tucked behind a dresser. Inside was a note in Marjorie's handwriting. If you're ever lost, give something. If you're ever lonely, open the door. If you're ever forgotten, remember someone else. I sat down, right there on the floor, and cried for a long, long time. It wasn't just about helping others. It was about remembering who I was before the bitterness, before the betrayal, before the silence. It was about building something again, not just for me, but for people who'd been through their own kind of abandonment. This house wasn't going to rot into dust. It wasn't going to be gutted and flipped. It wasn't going to be turned into a memory by someone who never earned it. It was going to live. By the end of the month, the first guest was scheduled to arrive. A Navy vet named Carl, 59, divorced, quiet, needed a place to get back on his feet. I just want a roof and a reason to wake up, he told me over the phone. You'll have both, I said. And as I stood at the window watching the driveway, waiting for Carl to arrive, I realized something else. This house was no longer a shrine. It was a second chance for all of us. Carl arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Just one duffel bag, a limp baseball cap, and eyes that looked like they'd stopped expecting kindness a long time ago. He stood at the base of the porch steps, unsure whether to knock or walk in. I opened the door before he had to decide. You must be Carl, I said. He gave a polite nod. Yes, sir. I can come back if this is a bad time. I stepped aside. No bad times here. Come in. He walked in slowly, like the floorboards might give out under him. I led him to the back guest room, freshly painted. New linens. A small bookshelf filled with paperbacks Marjorie collected over the years. I'm not much trouble, he said, setting his bag down gently. Won't be long. Just needed somewhere until I figure things out. You're not trouble, I replied. You're part of this house now. For a long moment, he just stood there, looking around. Then he nodded again, this time a little slower. I think he believed me. In the days that followed, Carl helped with everything. He fixed the broken porch step, trimmed the hedges, even reorganized the tools in my garage without me asking. We had dinner at the same table every night, simple meals, sometimes silent, sometimes not. It felt easy, like the house was breathing again. By the second week, 2 more joined us: Valerie, the Air Force vet with 2 kids, and Alan, a quiet man who'd served in Desert Storm and hadn't had a mailing address in 7 years. We cleared the sunroom for Valerie and her girls. They decorated it with drawings and string lights. Laughter started coming from rooms that hadn't known joy in years. Alan took the attic room, said it reminded him of the bunkhouse he used to sleep in with his unit. He didn't say much, but when he smiled, which was rare, it meant something. One night, over dinner, Valerie said, "Feels like home here." I didn't say anything, just nodded and passed the bread. But inside, my heart ached, not from pain, but from something deeper. Healing. Every creak of the floorboard, Every clang of a pot in the kitchen, every whispered bedtime story from down the hall, it stitched something back together in me. Something I thought was broken forever. I was no longer just an old man in a house filled with ghosts. I was part of a family again. A real family. One made of shared struggle, mutual respect, and quiet resilience. My son hadn't come by since the brunch. I figured he wouldn't. But I noticed his car passing by once or twice, slowing near the driveway, not stopping, just watching. He'd see people coming and going, see the lights on, the laughter through open windows, and he'd see that life didn't end when he walked away. It began. I'd heard from my grandson a few times, short texts, a photo of his new job badge, an invite to coffee that I planned to accept soon. There was still hope in that boy. Still some of Marjorie in him. One Sunday, Carl and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. He sipped iced tea and asked me, "Why'd you do this, Mr. Harris?" I looked out at the sky, the streaks of orange and purple melting into the horizon. "My wife," I said. "She believed homes aren't just buildings, they're promises. And I broke too many of those when I stayed silent for too long." He nodded slowly, understanding in his silence. Before heading inside, he said, "Feels like someone finally sees me." And I thought Marjorie would have said the same. I thought that was the end of it, the final chapter. But then, one evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, someone knocked on the front door. And when I opened it, I didn't expect who I saw. The knock came just after dinner. Carl was washing dishes, Valerie and her girls were playing a board game in the sunroom, and Alan had already retired to the attic with a paperback. The house had settled into a rhythm I'd come to cherish. So when I heard the knock, slow, deliberate, unfamiliar, something in me tightened. I opened the door and froze. It was him, my son. He looked older somehow, not aged, but worn, like someone who'd spent the last few weeks looking over his shoulder and finally realized the mirror was empty. He didn't speak right away. Neither did I. He held a small box in his hand, a weathered cardboard thing with tape around the edges. His eyes were glassy. I thought you might want this," he said. I didn't move. Didn't invite him in. Just waited. He opened the box slowly and pulled out a few things. A copy of my old Army service photo, a keychain Marjorie gave him when he got his driver's license, and a letter, the one I'd written to him years ago, back when he graduated college. "I found these in the garage. Thought you'd thrown them away." I finally spoke. "I didn't throw them away. I put them where they belonged." He winced. Just a little. "I deserve that," he said. There was a long silence. "You've been driving by," I said. He nodded. "Didn't know how to come back." "You knew how to leave," I replied. He looked down, swallowing hard. "Yeah." Another pause. Then he whispered, "I thought you'd be alone, after everything. But you're not. You made something better." I stepped out onto the porch with him. The air was cool. A soft breeze rustled the wind chimes. "I didn't do it to prove anything," I said. "I did it because I needed to start choosing what matters again." He nodded slowly. "I saw the lights on, heard laughter one night. It got to me." I watched him closely. "Why are you here?" I asked. Not unkindly, just plainly. He hesitated. "Not for money, not for the house. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." The words didn't hit me like I thought they would. They didn't undo anything, but they landed somewhere deeper, somewhere honest. I sat on the porch bench and gestured for him to sit. He did. "I gave you everything," I said, "and you treated it like nothing. Like I was nothing." He nodded. "I know. I let you stay here when you needed a place, and you tried to sell it out from under me. I was greedy," he said, "and stupid. I thought you'd always be there, that nothing I did would matter enough to change that. But it did," I said quietly. He wiped his face. "I miss Mom." "I know." We sat in silence, just breathing, just remembering. After a while, he asked, Do you hate me? I shook my head. Number, I grieved you. That's different. He flinched, but didn't argue. I stood up and said, come inside. His eyes widened. Really? Not to stay, just to visit. He followed me in. Carl nodded at him politely from the kitchen. Valerie smiled but stayed seated with her girls. Alan didn't come down. My son looked around the house, the newly painted walls, the humming energy, the signs of life. It feels alive, he said. It island. I walked him to the living room, where Marjorie's photo sat above the mantel. The same ring he once sold now rested inside a shadow box beside it, next to our wedding photo. He stared at it for a long time. I can't undo what I did, he said. No, I replied, but you can decide what kind of man you want to be next. He nodded, slowly. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. I'm not offering it, I answered. But I'm not closing the door either. He looked at me then, really looked, the way he used to when he was a child, trying to understand the world through my eyes. I'd like to come by again sometime, he said. We'll see, I replied. One visit at a time. He left, without asking for anything. No handouts, no pleading, just a slow, quiet goodbye. As the door closed, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness, but possibility. That night, I stood at the window, watching the porch light sway in the breeze. The house was full. The past was heavy. But the future? It was finally ready to begin. Was the son's visit too little? Too late? Share your thoughts below. The first official sign went up on a bright Saturday morning. White wooden post, hand-painted letters, and a soft blue border, Marjorie's favorite color. It read, Marjorie's Place, a home for those starting over. Carl helped me drive it into the front lawn. Valerie's girls tied sunflowers around the base. And Alan, quiet, steady. Alan built a small bench beside it, carved with the words, You're not alone anymore. I stood back, hands in my pockets, and took it all in. The house looked the same porch swing, same window panes, same creaky gate, but it felt entirely new. Not hollow, not haunted, alive. We held a small gathering that afternoon. Nothing big, just neighbors, a few folks from the VFW hall, and a local pastor who offered a quiet blessing over the new chapter we'd written. I said a few words short and from the heart. This house was built by love, I told them, and it was nearly destroyed by silence. But it survived, and now it will do what Marjorie always wanted it to do, open its doors to those who need it most. There wasn't a dry eye in the yard. After the guests left, the residents stayed out back, grilling hot dogs, laughing, sharing old stories. I stayed on the porch, sipping lemonade, listening to the kind of joy I thought I'd lost forever. That night, before turning in, I passed by the living room and paused at the shadow box on the mantel. Inside, Marjorie's ring sat beside a small photo, her holding a bouquet, smiling up at me the day we bought this house. Next to it, I added something new, a folded American flag, donated by Carl, who said it didn't belong in storage anymore. It belongs in a home that means something, he'd said. I lit a candle beside the photo and whispered, We did it, Marjorie. We kept our promise. A week later, I started getting letters. From people I'd never met, veterans, single parents, social workers, volunteers, some asking how to help, others sharing their own stories. A few just said thank you. I started a binder, Letters to Marjorie, I called it. Every time someone wrote about how this house made them feel seen, safe, human again, I'd imagine her reading it beside me. Then one afternoon the doorbell rang. It was my grandson again. This time with a clipboard and a stack of flyers. College is running a community volunteer program, he said. I signed up. Thought I'd start here. He spent the whole day helping Alan fix the front steps. Later, I saw him reading to Valerie's girls in the sunroom, and before he left, he gave me a hug, not the quick, polite kind, the real kind. You've built something important, Grandpa, he said. I'm proud of you. Those words healed something deep. One night, I sat outside, the porch light glowing behind me, the sound of laughter spilling from the kitchen window. I looked up at the stars, the same ones Marjorie and I used to lie under in the backyard, whispering dreams we never thought would come true. And I realized something. This wasn't a revenge story. It wasn't even just about loss. It was about reclaiming purpose, about choosing dignity when no one else would hand it to you, about building something from the rubble, not to erase the pain, but to give it shape. This house, Marjorie's house, was no longer a memory. It was a mission, and I was exactly where I was meant to be. Thank you for watching and listening. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing for more true life stories. And as always, honor your elders, protect your peace, and never let silence write your legacy.